So 2 days ago, this past Thursday, Miami Dolphins lose their starting quarterback. Tua Tagovailoa goes down with what appears to the outside perspective to be a pretty serious neurological injury to both his spine as well as a concussion. So why is this important? This isn't news to anybody. But what is news is the decision they ultimately made as a result of that injury. They went with veteran quarterback Teddy Bridgewater. And in most cases, especially on a team that is highly competitive, some argue, one of the better teams in the NFL currently. I mean, playing to, I believe, a 2-1 record, maybe 3-1, I think. What's interesting about this particular situation is very rarely do we see a legitimate competition between quarterbacks 2 and 3. There usually is none. In this case, it's a little bit different. In this case, backup Teddy Bridgewater was significantly outplayed in the preseason by the quarterback behind him. Those of you who don't know, rookie Skylar Thompson out of Kansas State, drafted in the 7th round. Doesn't really sound like much of a competition, but in the preseason it was. And I don't want to confuse anybody here. This is not a Tua versus Skylar Thompson conversation, because that's no longer a conversation, at least not for the foreseeable future. Right now, we're talking about Teddy Bridgewater, and we're talking about Skylar Thompson. The question I'm putting out there is Teddy Bridgewater the right move? And I don't know the answer to that. But what I can do is present some facts and ultimately ask some questions that I think need to be asked by the fan base of Miami and ultimately the front office and coaching staff. So let's look at it from a bigger picture, because that's the way you have to look at it. If you're the Miami Dolphins, as much as this hurts, and it's a painful experience. Nobody wants to see their starting quarterback go down. And this isn't a anti-Tua Tagovailoa video. It's just not. I respect the guy. He seems like a great guy. I've never met him. I wish the absolute best for him. Nobody wants to see a guy go through what he's ultimately going through right now. However, the predicament that the Miami Dolphins are now put into does create a lot of interesting conversation points. So I mentioned the preseason, and I'm not going to sit here and read facts to you, read statistics to you. That's just going to take up time. If you want to go ahead and do a quick Google search, the statistics will come right up for you. It's not a comparison. The argument with Tua versus Skylar Thompson was that Thompson was playing against backup defenses, and it's a legitimate argument. I don't see that as being a legitimate argument between him and Teddy Bridgewater. Now, what is a legitimate argument? Well, Teddy Bridgewater has had success at the NFL level, right? He's a 33-30 starter in the NFL. That's fact. That's not arguable. But that doesn't tell the whole story. That's really just a kind of bird's eye, zoomed out, pixelated view of the quarterback that Teddy Bridgewater is. After his major ACL injury and him leaving Minnesota, he's now a 16-19 NFL quarterback. And that may not be exact, but it's pretty close. Maybe it's 16-18 or 15. It's right in that ballpark. To say that Teddy Bridgewater, now at 31 years old, is the same quarterback that he was in Minnesota would just be false. It would be a delusional mindset to say that this is the same quarterback. Now, I mentioned big picture here. You hate to say it, but I'm just going to say it. It's the truth, and sometimes the truth hurts. There is a very realistic possibility that Tua Tagovailoa does not, I'm not saying he does not return. I believe he does play again this season. I think that's what all sources indicate. However, there's a very realistic possibility that he's never the same again. Neurological injuries are very serious. If you don't think so, ask Antonio Brown. Ask Ryan Shazier. Granted, okay, I'm showing, I don't want to say bias, but I'm a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. I'm not a Dolphins fan. I follow the Dolphins because they're in my market, And really all my friends are Dolphins fans. So I've got a very close view of this whole situation. I watched Skylar Thompson play a half of a football game in the preseason. But there is, back to what I was saying, there's a very realistic possibility that Tua Tagovailoa that we know to this point is no more. And if that's the case, the Dolphins are going to need another quarterback. And respectfully, going forward in the future, there's only one quarterback on the roster that can be that guy, and that's Skylar Thompson. Teddy Bridgewater is potentially a small bandage fix and nothing more. He does not have the potential to be the starting quarterback for this team beyond 2022. He just doesn't. You're delusional if you believe he does. I'm sorry, it's the truth. Skylar Thompson does. You don't have to believe it, but let me present you with some more facts. Skylar Thompson was drafted in the 7th round. That may seem out there. And I don't want to draw a comparison to Tom Brady. That's not fair. But look at Tom Brady. Look at Aaron Rodgers. Look at maybe Josh Allen is a bad example because he was drafted in the 1st round. How about Patrick Mahomes? What do these guys have in common? Small school quarterbacks, strong arms, maybe not as much in Brady's situation, but there's a lot of parallels here that we can draw. And also, let's take a look at what is Miami's major issue on offense right now. Well, they can't run the ball. They're in the bottom 5 to bottom 6 in the league in efficiency in terms of yards per carry. They're not going to be a rushing offense. In the half of football that we saw with Teddy Bridgewater under center, essentially what the Dolphins tried to do was win the game on the ground. It didn't work, and it won't work. Now, granted, I understand. We're talking about a short week. Certainly the Dolphins weren't expecting Teddy Bridgewater to be the guy. So, okay, we give him a break on that one. But there's a lot more going on than that, especially in the head of Teddy Bridgewater, because he knows what I'm talking about right now. He knows that one false move, Miami's going to be calling for Skylar Thompson to be in that game. The fans, maybe even some of the coaches. Because also Skylar Thompson possesses something that neither of the other quarterbacks in Miami have. Well, actually, multiple things. Number one is an arm. His arm talent is on a different plane than the 31-year-old Teddy Bridgewater or Tua Tagovailoa. Now, Tua may be able to beat him in an accuracy competition. That's quite possible. You know, that's been his MO is his accuracy as a quarterback. What he can't do is put the ball downfield. And we've seen it. We saw it to this point in the season. We saw it in the first half of the game against Cincinnati where he was underthrowing Tyreek Hill significantly. And even if Tua Tagovailoa is to come back and be what he was prior to injury, that's still going to remain an issue. That's not going to change. But we can tackle that at a later date. What we need to talk about right now is what Skylar Thompson brings to the table that the other quarterbacks don't. The other thing is a clean slate. You've got a new coach in Mike McDaniel who's an offensive guru. Now, granted, does his system and the system that was in place in San Francisco open itself better to a mobile quarterback? Potentially. But you also have a clean slate in a guy like Skylar Thompson, who's played under no other professional offenses, and again has the arm strength that some of these other guys do not have. Most of the rest is pretty arguable. But what I saw from Skylar Thompson was not only a strong arm, but a guy that had incredible feel in the pocket for a rookie quarterback drafted in the 7th round, who really has not played on a big stage. He's played in 2 bowl games in his career, but not really on much of a big stage. I was impressed. I'm not impressed very often by quarterbacks. I'll just be honest with you. I'm really not. It takes a lot to impress me as a quarterback. Skylar Thompson did that. Now, again, are we talking about a very small sample size? We are. And should we make decisions on a small sample size? Probably not. But I think the questions that I've asked in this video should at least be thought-provoking. Does Teddy Bridgewater make more sense than Skylar Thompson? Let me give you another point. The Miami Dolphins schedule for the next 5 weeks is arguably the easiest in the NFL. The only real competition they face is a Minnesota Vikings team that really has shown no ability on the defensive side of the ball. They play the Jets, they play the Vikings, they play my Steelers, they play the Lions, and they play the Bears. Arguably, no easier 5-game stretch of any other team in the NFL do the Dolphins have in front of them. Do you need Teddy Bridgewater to win those games? Does he give you that much more than Skylar Thompson? My answer is no, he doesn't. If anything, he gives you less. And I think Skylar Thompson is eager for the opportunity. I think that there's really no downside for him. When you're a 7th-round draft pick and you're thrust onto the scene, I mean, you're not really expected to be the guy. Now, yes, do Dolphins fans get a little bit over the top? Do they expect the world of certain things? Yeah, absolutely. They're definitely one of those fan bases that its heads can be in the clouds a little bit. I live in South Florida. I will 100% agree with you in that assessment. However, going back to what I was just talking about, the major argument for Teddy Bridgewater is the short-term fix. Do you need Teddy Bridgewater to win those games? Does he legitimately give you more at the quarterback position than Skylar Thompson does? Then you're left with really only one argument, which is his experience. And it's a real one. It is. But once again, I present to you the question. Even with Tua Tagovailoa under center, what is the major issue here with Miami's offense? It's Tua's ability to push the ball down the field. Skylar Thompson gives you that ability. Now, does it work out? Does it work out? Does it not work out? I don't know. As Al Pacino said in Son of a Woman, I'm not a judge or jury. I don't know how that plays out. However, what I can tell you is, based on what I saw of a half of football of Teddy Bridgewater, there's not a lot of confidence there. The Dolphins don't have a lot of hope with that being the particular situation that they're in. There just isn't. And coming into one of the easiest stretches of football they could possibly have. And we don't know Tua's timetable. We don't. Nobody does. It could be 2 weeks. It could be a month. It could be the rest of the season. We don't know. And also potential consequences coming from the NFL to the Miami Dolphins for not properly evaluating Tua's neurological condition. We don't know what that's going to do to Tua. Is he going to be sidelined because of investigations? We don't know. What I do know is the Dolphins have one of the highest powered offenses in the NFL and have the opportunity with a quarterback that could potentially be the future sitting on their bench. And maybe he's not. But again, the last question that I ask, is it worth finding out? Is it? Or, because if not, have you totally written this kid off? And if that's the case, now we're talking about bigger internal problems than just who's taking snaps. Because this kid had the number 1 passer rating in preseason this year in the NFL. Now, granted, again, I realize a lot of starters didn't play. Which is why to say that, that comparison between Teddy Bridgewater and Skylar Thompson is a pretty apt comparison. I mean, they played in the same offense. They played with a second unit. I'm just saying, is Teddy Bridgewater the right move?